Welcome to my podcast. I'm the Laughing Philosopher. Life is complicated. You are complicated. Everything seems to have been figured out, except how to live a happy life, guided by wisdom and reason. What does it mean to be a good person? What is love? Who am I before I was told who I am? Why haven't I found myself yet? Why do I have regrets? Is this a just world? Almost from the moment of birth, we've been told how to behave, how to fit in, and how to fulfill other people's expectations. We grow to fear that we will lack importance or cease to exist in the lives of others if we think for ourselves and question the rules and roles that we've been told define us. Only when wisdom and reason removes this illusion can we live authentically in the world around us and become our real selves. Episode number 25. Why don't you feel at home in this world? Do you live in a just world? Is life fair or unfair? You figured out everything else. Go all the way. If you do, then you will feel justified to go on living. If you don't, then you will never feel at home in this world. Let's reason together. We must believe in a just world, or life is not worth living. We see bad things happen to good people who don't deserve to be punished. We see good things happen to bad people who don't deserve to be rewarded. We march for justice. We weep against injustice. And we pray to have our ideals fulfilled. A cop beats up a homeless guy on blood-drenched pavement. A thief wins an important election through lying and cheating. A man is murdered because of the color of his face. Human beings are disgusted by and will not tolerate injustice. This must be a fair and just world where only good people prosper and only the evil suffer. If good and evil are meaningless, if good and bad things happen to good and bad persons for no reason or purpose, then there is no reason or purpose to go on living. Justice is as important to our way of life as God. So we ask why? If God is all good and all powerful, why then does evil exist in a just world? Is God malicious or just impotent? And if we must choose between the idea of God and the ideal of the just world, then we prefer to reject our trust in an all-powerful and all-benevolent God, rather than to reject our faith in a just and fair world. As a tree clings to the sun, the just world is the chief cornerstone of our web of belief and understanding of how the world ought to be and how we ought to live. So, how can I know whether or not my life is fair and whether or not my world is just? How can I know from what I see and what I experience? A whole is made up of parts. A whole made up of parts will have properties that none of its parts possess. Males as a group may be less compassionate than females as a group, but that doesn't mean any individual male is less compassionate than any individual female. Jesus wept. What is true of the whole will not necessarily be true of each of its parts. On the whole, it may be a just world, but that doesn't mean bad things won't happen to you. Even though you are a good person, and good things won't happen to your ex, even though he or she is a bad person. That doesn't mean bad things won't happen to any individual good person, and good things won't happen to any individual bad person. You may believe that it is a just world, but even if true, that doesn't mean your individual life is just. Bad things happen to good persons, and good things happen to bad persons, even in a just world. A whole made up of parts also will not have the same properties as its parts. Every brick in a wall may weigh 5 pounds, but that doesn't mean the wall itself weighs 5 pounds. Every individual thing in the universe has a cause, but that doesn't mean the universe itself has a cause. A supernatural creator may not be necessary. The universe may be made up of eternal, uncreated matter, and just is. If something cannot come from nothing, then shouldn't it be just as difficult for nothing to come from something? But it happens. Every moment of every day. Each individual part may have properties that all of the parts, if taken together, do not possess, just as the parts will, as a whole, have properties that each individual part does not possess. To be true of any member of a group does not mean that it is true of every member of the group. If you stand up at a concert, you will see better. But that doesn't mean if every person stands up, then every person will see better. If you are a good person, justly punished and justly rewarded, that doesn't mean the world is just. The properties of the whole are not those of its parts, and the properties of its parts are not those of the whole. It can be a just world, even if there is injustice in your individual life. And in your just life, you can be justly rewarded and justly punished, even if the world as a whole is unjust. What then can I conclude about my life and my world? Can I know whether or not my life is just? No, not from my world. I can believe, I can have faith, I can trust that my world is just, but I cannot infer from the world as a whole to my individual life. Can I know whether or not my world is just? No, not from my life. I can know the nature of my individual life, but I cannot infer from this individual part to the nature of the world as a whole. Wittgenstein said, "The sense of the world must lie outside the world. Everything is as it is, and everything happens as it does. In the world, no value exists." No value exists, like good and evil, just and unjust, fair and unfair. Can I even know what is just and unjust? What is moral and immoral? What is good and bad? What is right and wrong? Can I figure out what ought to be? No. You cannot derive ought to be from is, or is from ought to be. Thinking that something is just because it ought to be is irrational and a logical fallacy. The ways of the world are under no obligation to respect your morality or to conform to your judgments of rightness and wrongness. The world doesn't obey your value judgments and adapt itself to fit your moral tastes and preferences. That's what Wittgenstein means by, "In the world, no value exists." Just because something ought to be doesn't mean that it is, or even that it is possible and can be. There ought to be life after death. There ought to be a just world. There ought to be a supreme being. The Bible ought to be true. Life ought to be fair. How many of your beliefs and convictions about how the world works are just your desires and dreams of how the world ought to be? Dozens. Like a butterfly that dreams of being a person, you can't get to is from ought. Just as Shakespeare's Hamlet said, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Like you and me, Hamlet is an eternal prisoner of his own personal values and judgments, with no possibility of escape. So you can't get to is from ought. You also can't get to ought from is. To get from it is to it ought to be is irrational and illogical. Nature is good, we are told. So what is natural is good, and unnatural is bad. Masturbation is wrong because it is unnatural. Homosexuality is wrong because it is unnatural. Women should be restricted to the home and denied careers because, by nature, they are better equipped to be homemakers. Society ought to favor the strong, not only to survive, but to oppress the weak. The strong possess a natural right to rule, because in nature, this is true. The lion does not lay down with the lamb. But why is nature natural? Animals engage in many behaviors that would be considered irresponsible, illegal, and morally reprehensible in human society. Even if women are more naturally suited to be homemakers, we, human beings, have been quite effective and efficient at overcoming our natural limitations. We can fly higher than an eagle. We can travel faster than a cheetah. We are more powerful than a parade of elephants. We are naturally able to invent things that transcend our given nature. True, we are part of nature, but it isn't clear or easy to distinguish what is natural from what is unnatural in human behavior. In short, you can't conclude what the world ought to be from what the world is. So, to sum up, do you live in a just or unjust world? Is your life fair? Judgments about what is just or unjust, fair or unfair, good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral, are unaskable and unanswerable. Even though these are the most significant questions posed by human beings about themselves. They aren't factual questions. They are useful nonsense. The last words of Wittgenstein's Tractatus: whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Jesus said, "Don't judge, and you won't be judged." Yes, he was speaking about judgments of other persons and judgments of the world. But Jesus was also speaking about you judging yourself. Jesus asks, "Who has appointed you to be a judge of anyone, including yourself?" Stop seeing yourself as good or bad, and your life as fair or unfair, and the world as just or unjust. Nietzsche said, "There is no such thing as moral phenomena, but only a moral interpretation of phenomena." Good and evil, morality and immorality do not exist in the world, but only in your mind. Hamlet knows this, and now, so do you. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your life. And be gentle with the world. Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Corey, the Laughing Philosopher. Thanks for listening to my podcast. I've devoted my professional life to the intersection of sociology and philosophy, where the contemporary problems of life meet the ideas and convictions of the greatest human minds. Join me by subscribing to the Laughing Philosopher as we use reason and wisdom to explore big answers to the most important of all big questions: how to live.